It is the 24th of May, 2016. We are in the second Feast of Unleavened Bread and studying the community rule. So let's ask our Heavenly Family to bless us and then get into things. Heavenly Family, Todah, what a world of opportunity that you've given to us. And thank you so much for the fact that as much work as there is to do and as vast of a world we live in, there are means of bringing us to the restoration of all things. And you have revealed to us this beautiful and wonderful message that can indeed bind families together in love and bind communities together in love. Thank you so much, Heavenly Family. Let it be so. And if the community rule is part of this, help us to realize it and help us to understand what we're going to be reading now. We know that the ideas spoken of are very broad, and we need to know the truth, knowing that it will set us free. Todah, please guide us in our investigation. Sister, help us to realize just what you want us to. Todah, we ask these things, Father and Mother. B'Shem Tzemach Huahi.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Going into a new section of the community rule. And once we get into it, it'll be evident to everyone that it really is a new section. And, a new section could mean a number of different things. When you read a book of the Bible or another ancient Jewish writing, and it switches from one thing to another kind of suddenly, that could mean a couple things. It could just mean simply a change in subject matter. It could also mean a change from one writing to another with different authors even. So it's something that we have to investigate. Okay, well, who are all these sections written by the same person, or are they written by different people? Was it originally one composition, or were these separate compositions that were at some point stitched together? And if they were stitched together, who stitched them and why? And was it something that the original author or authors were involved in and in favor of? So, again, some of the questions that we have, we might not get them all answered. Some of these things maybe we can't know for sure the exact history, like, okay, well, if certain things were stitched together, who stitched them, that might be hard to determine. But we can, the bottom line anyways, is that we can investigate everything on its own merits to see whether it is true. But the reason why it's important for us to understand if everything is all part of one composition or separate compositions is because in order to judge a composition, you have to judge it as a whole. In other words, let's say the community rule is all one thing. Okay, so if you find however many things that are teaching true principles, but then there's also some sort of deadly heresy there, well, then you would have to throw out the whole thing. If, on the other hand, there are a number of different compositions that were then later stitched together to make up the community rule, then you'd have to judge each composition separately. That is, if they came from different hands, so to speak. It's kind of like with the Bible, how you can't judge one book in the Bible by another book. You kind of have to judge them on their own merits and each individually. That is, of course, with the exception of books that were written by the same author. You have to judge the works of the author as a whole and to judge whether that person was inspired by the spirit of truth or by the spirit of error. So anyways, these things are just preliminary principles that I wanted to mention to keep in mind as we read not only the community rule, but everything. So anyways, where we are at in the community rule, again, the primary document for the community rule is known as 1QS. It was found in the first cave of Qumran, and the title in Hebrew is Serek HaYahad, the rule of the community. And where we are in 1QS is column 3, line 13 or 14. And what I think that I'll do at the beginning of this is just read through this whole section on the two spirits. So that goes from this point, column 3, line 13 or so, until the end of column 4. And then column 5 starts a new section. So we'll read the whole thing just to get the overview, and then we can go back to the beginning and investigate it more closely. So guide us as we read this, Heavenly Family. Help us to see the truth of it, whatever that may be. Todah. The Master shall instruct all the sons of light, and shall teach them the nature of all the children of men according to the kind of their spirits, the signs identifying their works during their generations, and their visitation for afflictions, together with the time of their reward, or the time of their restoration or peace, time of their shalom in Hebrew. From the God of knowledge comes all that is and shall be. Before they came to be, he ordered all their designs, and when, as ordained for them, they come into being, it is in accord with his glorious design that they accomplish their task without alteration. The laws of all things are in his hand, and he provides them with all their needs. He has created humanity to govern the world, and has appointed for them two spirits with which they may walk until the time of his visitation. They are the spirits of truth and falsehood. From the source of light come all the generations of truth, and from the source of darkness come all the generations of falsehood. In the hand of the Prince of Light is the dominion over all the children of righteousness. In the way of light they walk. And in the hand of the messenger of darkness is the dominion over all the children of falsehood. In the way of darkness they walk. From the messenger of darkness stems the corruption of all the children of righteousness. All their sin, iniquities, wickedness, and all their unlawful deeds are at his prompting. God, in his mysteries, allows this until his era dawns, and all their afflictions and seasons of distress are caused by his diabolical rule, and all the spirits allied with him share but a single resolve, to cause the sons of light to fall. But the God of Israel and the messenger of his truth help all the sons of light. For he it is who created the spirits of light and darkness. And upon them are built every deed, and upon them are founded every work, and upon their paths all actions. One, or first, God, or one of them, God loves for all eternal ages, and in all its deeds he is pleased forever. The other he abhors, her counsel or foundation, and all her paths he hates for all time. These are their ways in the world.
Okay, it's very difficult to follow because everything's so different. I was doing pretty good up until right in there. Have you started the next paragraph yet?
Yes, we are just starting the paragraph just after the beginning of column 4.
Okay.
Okay. These are their ways in the world. 1, for the enlightenment of the mind of man, and so that all the paths of true righteousness may be made straight before him, and so that the fear of the laws of God may be instilled in his heart. It is a spirit of humility, patience, abundant love, unending goodness, understanding, and intelligence. A spirit of mighty wisdom which trusts in all the deeds of God and leans on his great loving kindness. A spirit of discernment in every purpose, of zeal for just laws, of holy intent with steadfastness of mind, of great love towards all the sons of truth, of admirable purity which detests all unclean idols, of humble conduct, sprung from an understanding of all things, and of faithful concealment of the mysteries of truth. These are the counsels or foundations of the Spirit to all the sons of truth in this world. And as for the visitation or the reward of all who walk in this Spirit, it shall be healing, great peace in a long life, and fruitfulness, together with every everlasting blessing, and eternal joy in life without end, a crown of glory and a garment of majesty in unending light. But the ways of the spirit of falsehood are these: greed and slackness in the search for righteousness, wickedness and lies, haughtiness and pride, falseness and deceit, cruelty and abundant evil, ill temper and much folly, and brazen insolence or rudeness or disrespect, abominable deeds committed in a spirit of lust, and ways of lewdness in the service of uncleanness, a blaspheming tongue, blindness of eye and dullness of ear, stiffness of neck and heaviness of heart, so that man walks in all the ways of darkness and guile. And the visitation of all who walk in this spirit shall be a multitude of afflictions by the hand of all the messengers of destruction, everlasting damnation by the avenging wrath of the fury of God, enduring torment and endless disgrace, together with shameful annihilation in the fire of the dark regions. And all the times of their generations shall be spent in sorrowful mourning, and in bitter misery, and in calamities of darkness, until they are destroyed, without remnant or survivor. In these are the generations of all the children of humanity, and in these divisions all their hosts possess an inheritance for the generations, or for their generations. And in their paths they walk. And the whole reward for their deeds shall be for everlasting ages, according to whether each man's portion in their two divisions is great or small. For God has set these as equals until the final age, and has placed everlasting enmity between their divisions. Truth abhors the works of falsehood, and falsehood hates all the ways of truth. And their struggle is fierce in all their arguments, for they do not walk together. But in the mysteries of his understanding and in his glorious wisdom, God has ordained an end for falsehood, and at the time of the visitation he will destroy it forever. then truth, which has wallowed in the ways of wickedness during the dominion of falsehood, until the appointed time of judgment, shall arise in the world forever. God will then purify every deed of man with his truth. He will refine for himself some from the children of humanity, by extinguishing out all the spirit of falsehood from the innards or the depths of their flesh. He will cleanse him of all the deeds of wickedness in the spirit of holiness. Like purifying waters, he will sprinkle upon him the spirit of truth, to cleanse him of all abomination and falsehood. And he shall be plunged into the spirit of purification, that he may instruct the upright in the knowledge of the Most High, and teach the wisdom of the sons of heaven to the perfect of way. For God has chosen them for an everlasting covenant, and all the glory of Adam shall be theirs. There shall be no more lies, and all the works of falsehood shall be put to shame. Until now, the spirits of truth and falsehood struggle, or let's see if I can read this here, contend, there we go. Until now, the spirits of truth and falsehood contend in the minds of men. They walk in wisdom or in folly. According to his portion of truth and righteousness, so does a man hate falsehood. And according to his inheritance in the lot of falsehood, so is he wicked and so hates truth. For God has established the two spirits in equal measure until the determined end, and until the renewal. And he knows the results of their deeds for all time. He has allotted them to the children of men, that they may know good and evil, and that the lot of all the living may be according to their spirit in the day of their appointed visitation. So that's the section on the two spirits. I know that in some sections in particular it was quite different from the Giza Vermes translation, which the majority of you have in front of you. This was a section that I had to go through very carefully, and it took lots of time comparing multiple translations again and looking at the Hebrew text. And the way that I read it just now is, after all the research into it, what seems to be the most accurate translation that I can presently see. There may be things that could be translated more accurately within that, of course. It's not to say that it's perfect or that it ever could be, just by virtue of the fact that it's going from one language to another. But that seems to convey the thoughts a little bit more clearly, especially in regard to some things. So we will go back, of course, to the beginning of this and start with the first paragraph and the first line of the first paragraph. But does anyone have any comments or questions concerning this section as a whole? Again, what we're really looking for now is if there's something as a whole. If it's just a specific thing in regard to a detail that was mentioned at some point in there, of course, if it has an impact on how one understands the whole thing, then sure, that may be totally fitting. But we are going to be going through this whole thing in detail. So if your question is just kind of more particular to one spot, then maybe it is better to wait until we get to that spot in a more detailed study. But anyway, are there any questions or comments in regard to this section before going back to the beginning of it?
I have a question, please.
Sure.
Trent, do you happen to have in written form what you have read so that we can look at it along with our copies and stuff? Is it possible that you could email us what you have written?
I do not currently have it in a typed form. I just wrote it in with a pencil into the version that I have. But at some point, it will certainly be not only good but important to do that. And at some point, we may end up publishing a translation of the community rule with a detailed commentary or study on it or something like that.
I have an idea.
Okay.
If tonight or tomorrow anyone has the time to do this, they can listen to the recording and transcribe the reading of this section and email it out to people. If someone has the time to do that, that is one way of getting it.
That would be great. If someone, would be able to do that, that would be wonderful. Just because we are intensely busy around here lately, so if, I don't know exactly when I would get the opportunity to type it all out. So if there is someone, you can always call back in to the call. However, I don't know if you can pause and go back, so that might actually be somewhat of a challenge. Unless you have a way to record it as you listen to it and then go from that other recording. But so we'll see how it all happens. Heavenly Family, please guide us to the best way. The other thing that I'll mention is for those of you who have a physical book with you, as we are going through and studying things in a more detailed way, it might be beneficial for you to actually just write down within your book or in a notebook or something like that the alternate translations. Okay, are there any other comments or questions?
Well, I'll just tell you really quick, I've listened to several calls later that evening of the night that they were given or the next day. And yes, we can pause, and that's number 5 for pause, and number 4 takes us back 1 minute. Number 6 takes us forward 1 minute. So I just thought I would include that so everyone would know if they have never done it before.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's actually excellent. Wonderful. Toda.
Sounds doable.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't know if this is very profound or not, but I just found it interesting. In every case where Guy Vermes translates the word injustice, you put it as falsehood.
Yeah, it's a more accurate translation, really. Injustice. It's kind of often for justice, people often translate it from the word sadiq, which is the word for righteousness. So the right thing or the just thing is the same in Hebrew. Like the just shall live by faith, or the righteous shall live by faith. So righteousness and justice are basically the same thing in Hebrew. But this isn't that word. This isn't the word for righteousness or justice or unrighteousness or injustice. It's a different word. And from what I was able to discover, and other translations have falsehood as well, but for some reason that's how he chose to translate this word. But the distinction is actually more clear as well, because truth and falsehood are more of direct juxtapositions than truth and injustice are. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say I really appreciate Praise Our Heavenly Family for the fact that we're getting a good translation or a better translation at the same time that we're studying this.
Amen. Yeah, it does make a difference. I mean, in all of the translations that I've read, you get the same basic idea, but there's one translation, for instance, when there were certain phrases, and I would compare their translation with the Hebrew text, and they even had to add phrases at times in order to translate it in the way that they wanted, and they translated it in a way that was very much in promotion of a very deterministic predestination theology, when I really don't see that at all as being the theology expressed here. It has to do with the person's choice. Are they choosing to go according to truth or error? And that's basically what it boils down to. A couple thoughts that I have regarding the whole thing that we just read. This whole idea of the two spirits or the two ways, and it referred to them in here as ways also, or paths. Obviously, this is something that is picked up in the Nazarene movement. The Didache, the whole first 5 or 6 chapters, is devoted to the teaching of the two ways. And it is so very similar to this. Likewise, the Epistle of Barnabas, I think chapters 18, 19, and 20 are devoted to the two ways. And it's, again, very, very similar to this. And there are other sayings, and I think I might even have these written down in notes, and we can look at some of them. But I know that we have read the first 5 or 6 chapters of the Didache together on the calls before, and we have also read the two ways section in the Epistle of Barnabas. So we may or may not end up doing that again. It wouldn't really hurt. It might be a good idea, although it is taking a longer path for studying this, but maybe that's totally fine. So any other comments on this section as a whole? Okay. And actually, I'm going back to the beginning of this, and it turns out the first note that I have is actually regarding these things as a whole. And I'll mention some more details, I guess, on this whole thing of the two ways and other passages that deal with the two ways. So there's the Didache, the first 5 chapters. And maybe I'll just read the very beginning of it so you guys can hear again how it starts. Okay, so the first verse of the Didache. There are 2 paths, or 2 ways, one of life and one of death, and the difference between the 2 paths is great. That's how it begins. Verse 2 of chapter 1 of the Didache says, this then is the path of life. And it goes on describing the path of life, what it is like. And then, let's see here where it switches to the other path. It's chapter 5. And the path of death is this. And then it goes on describing that path. You have these 2 ways, or the 2 paths, equivalent to the 2 spirits. And, if you read what it says concerning them, it's so similar to the community rule, other than it's less, I'll use the term mythological. Myth doesn't mean a fiction, by the way, other than just in common speech. But when historians talk about myth, they're talking about the origin of things, and kind of like an origins type history, a history that's dealing with the original, the way things happened at the very beginning to get things going. That's called a myth. So people, like Bible scholars, will refer to the first few chapters of Genesis as the creation myth. But it's, many of these people are believers. They're not saying that it's a fiction. It's just that that's the term that is used to describe that type of story. It's the type of story that's telling a history of very important origins, or the origin of the way things are, that sort of thing. In the two ways, in the Didache and in the Epistle of Barnabas, it doesn't really talk about the origin of the ways and kind of the bigger picture behind these two ways. It just says, here are the two ways. There are two ways. Here's the first way, and here's the second way. In the community rule, it is kind of a little bit more explanatory in that it not only tells you that there are two ways and what they are and what they are like, it tells you the origin of the ways, it tells you the bigger picture as to who is kind of behind each way, and it tells you the ultimate end of each way. So it's a bigger picture type of story. But it's totally significant and worthy of note that the Didache starts with this teaching that is the same basic teaching that we find in the community rule. Again, one of the reasons why that is so significant is because the Didache could possibly be the earliest Nazarene document that is known, period. And it's interesting how it talks about, in chapter 7 of the Didache, when it talks about baptism, it says, having said all these things in advance. So it's like, okay, the teaching of the two ways is to be brought forward first when someone has accepted the teaching and so on and so forth, then they are eligible for baptism. So it seems, if the Didache is the earliest or one of the earliest Nazarene documents, then it is so significant that it starts out with this teaching. It's kind of making this perhaps one of the central teachings of the Nazarene movement. And if it is one of the central teachings of the Nazarene movement, it kind of begs the question, where did this teaching come from? We know that it did not originate with Paul or with one of the apostles or with Jesus during his ministry, because we already find it in Qumran. We find it in the Thanksgiving hymns, written, of course, by the teacher of righteousness, the founding messenger of the Qumran community. And we find it here in the community rule in perhaps its most explanatory form. It's in its most thorough setting in the community rule. So that's one very important text, the Didache, and it has this teaching. Another very important text is the Epistle of Barnabas. The Epistle of Barnabas, or the letter of Barnabas, we've talked about it in the past, so I won't go into much detail, but again, it's one of the earliest quote-unquote Christian or potentially Nazarene texts that did not end up making it into the Christian canons. At one point, it certainly was considered scripture by many people. It's included as part of the New Testament in Codex Sinaiticus, I believe, along with 1 Clement, or perhaps the Shepherd of Hermas. I'd have to go back to verify that, but the Epistle of Barnabas is included. So it's very early, very significant, early enough that it could possibly actually be written by Barnabas. And again, in chapters 18 to 20, we have this same teaching. This is how it starts, chapter 18, verse 1. But let us turn to another area of knowledge and teaching. There are two paths of teaching and authority, the path of light and the path of darkness. And the difference between the two paths is great. For over the one are appointed light-bearing angels of God, and over the other, angels of Satan. Okay, so this one, that's a detail that's left out of the Didache, and this is more similar to the community rule in that it mentions the angels of God and the angels of Satan. So you have this idea here in the letter of Barnabas. So that's another significant thing that we shouldn't miss. There are other passages, even in the New Testament, that have a similar type of way of speaking of things as the two ways or the two spirits. I'll go to a couple of them. The first one is Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. It says, "Enter through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide, and the way is spacious that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. But the gate is narrow, and the way is difficult that leads to life, and there are few who find it." Okay, so there you have two ways with their two gates. So you have this teaching, which you find, according to Matthew, was a teaching that Jesus himself advocated, that was included as part of his overall teaching. Luke chapter 13, verse 24. "Exert every effort to enter through the narrow door, because many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able." So there you have the same type of teaching as you found in Matthew. It's less specific as to the two ways, but it's clearly part of that whole way of speaking and that whole theology. Then we also have Galatians 5, verses 16 to 26. Now, this is using a different type of imagery than saying two ways, but you guys will see the similarity, I'm sure. So Galatians 5, verses 16 to 26. "But I say, live by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desires of the flesh. For the flesh has desires that are opposed to the Spirit, and the Spirit has desires that are opposed to the flesh. For these are in opposition to each other, so that you cannot do what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, depravity, idolatry, sorcery, hostilities, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish rivalries, dissensions, factions, envying, murder, drunkenness, carousing, and similar things. I am warning you, as I had warned you before, those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also behave in accordance with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, being jealous of one another. Okay, so there you have two principles contrasted, the Spirit and the flesh. And Paul here lists the various actions or aspects of or fruits is perhaps the better way to put it, fruits of the flesh and the fruits of the Spirit. And you see the list, the negative list for the flesh is very similar to the list in the community rule for the spirit of darkness. And the list of the fruit of the Spirit is similar to what it says in the community rule concerning the Spirit of truth and the ways of the Spirit of truth. So it's that same general teaching of contrasting these two principles. And then another text that relates to this whole idea is in the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, and it is the Testament of Asher. The Testament of Asher has language that is very similar to the teaching of the two ways. The Testament of Asher, chapter 1, starting at verse... Well, I'll actually start at verse 1 and just read a few of the verses so you guys can see how it's putting things. A copy of the Testament of Asher, the things he spoke to his sons in the 125th year of his life. While he was still healthy, he said to them, "Listen, children of Asher, to your father, and I will show you everything that is right in the sight of God. God has granted two ways to the sons of men, two mindsets, two lines of action, two models, and two goals. Accordingly, everything is in pairs, the one over against the other. The two ways are good and evil." And then he goes on and describes them. And if memory serves, the whole of the Testament of Asher is primarily devoted to this discussion. So that's another parallel passage to what we find here in the community rule. So I wanted to mention these things so that either we will end up going through them together on the calls, and if not, at least you guys can, you have the references, you can go and study them and compare with the community rule. So any comments on that before we get into the first paragraph here of this section?
Well, what we just went through really makes it seem very likely that this is from our Heavenly Family. And it doesn't seem like it's a different author. Like you mentioned, it could be a possibility. To me, just at first glance, because it seems, well, I'll say this, it sure seems to have the same ideas presented in it as within the first part of the community rule, and then the same ideas that we've seen over and over in these other writings.
And I'll certainly have to say that I agree with that. I don't know of any evidence that would really suggest that this part of the community rule is written by a different author from the first part. Also, one of the aspects of that is the first part, talking about entering into the covenant and all that, it has its parallels in the Thanksgiving hymns. In the Thanksgiving hymns, you find the basic content of the first section of the community rule that we've already gone through, just in a more abbreviated form. It's not for the purpose of explaining it. But it shows that at the time of the teacher of righteousness, those ideas were present, that way of doing things, entering into the covenant and all of that, that was all present and part of the message, part of the movement. And so it's very easy to think that goes back to the time of the teacher of righteousness. Likewise, with this second part, not only are there many similarities with the first part, not only does it express the same theology and have the same terminology and different things like that, or at least it shares much of the terminology, at least as much as you would expect it to. But it also has parallels with the Thanksgiving hymns. And the Thanksgiving hymns compared with this show that this teaching was present in the time of the teacher of righteousness. And it was part of the movement. It was part of his message because it's expressed in the Thanksgiving hymns. And so far, everything in the community rule fits very well with the very earliest phases of the community during the time of the teacher of righteousness. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So I'll read this first paragraph again. And Heavenly Family, please bless us to exercise the right principles of investigation. The Master shall instruct all the sons of light, and shall teach them the nature of all the children of men, according to the kind of their spirits. The signs identifying their works during their lifetime or during their generation, and their visitation for afflictions, together with the time of their shalom, which could be translated reward, or peace, or restoration. So let's go back to the first part. The Master shall instruct all the sons of light, and shall teach them the nature of the children of men, according to the kind of their spirits. What do you guys think? Any comments?
Somehow I don't think this is it, but since it's so quiet, I'll just throw this out there.
Okay.
So the Master shall instruct all the sons of light. Well, that little phrase would be that the messenger, the Master, will be teaching all of those people who have chosen light over darkness, so to speak, or chosen to follow God, chosen to I just had the word and it escaped me, but chosen to be rid of falsehood and all these negative things, unrighteousness and all that. So you can't be called sons of light unless you've made steps toward that and even maybe achieve that. I don't know. But so the Master or messenger is instructing or teaching these people the nature of all the children of men according to the kind of spirit which they possess. So I'm just kind of wondering, are they just instructing them on how to, different thoughts are going through my mind, but one of them, I'll just pick one. So one of them is, are they teaching them how to basically minister to people, how to reach people, how to understand their various natures so that they understand how best to reach them according to their nature, according to which kind of spirit they have? That's one thought that's going through my mind.
Okay. Any comments or thoughts on that?
I think he's just teaching them their two choices, period, so here's your two choices, none other.
Okay.
I noticed that too. It struck me like it did you, Teresa. What I was thinking, of course, there are only two spirits that people could be led by, and so according to the kind of spirit, I'm assuming that's the way I'm looking at it. I could be wrong, but I was thinking according to each spirit. So, in other words, if the teacher of righteousness is working with someone who is already, who already follows the spirit of truth, then he would deal with them in one way. And if they are in the kingdom of darkness, he would deal with them another way, possibly.
Okay. Well, that would certainly be the case, and there are places later in the community rule that essentially state that. Although, of course, here, what it's referring to is just him instructing the sons of light. But yeah, I would definitely say that the basic idea, and by the way, Carol, I'm glad that you mentioned the teacher of righteousness, because I was going to ask, even though we've gone through this before, it's important for us to keep it in mind. It says here, the master. Well, who is the master, and who, within the original context of this, if this does go back to the time of the teacher of righteousness, who is the master? And, well, if that's the case, then it would certainly be the teacher of righteousness. The master is a self-designating term used by the teacher of righteousness in the Thanksgiving hymns. So the basic idea is that there are those who are following the truth. They're called sons of light or children of light. And the master is supposed to instruct them and to teach them concerning the nature of the children of men according to the kind of their spirit. So basically he's supposed to teach them that depending on what one chooses, because remember that one's spirit is one's will. Your will is your choice or your decision-making faculty. And depending on what one chooses, they are either going to be of the spirit of truth or the spirit of falsehood. If they are of the spirit of truth, then their nature will be like this. In other words, their characteristics will be like this. If they are of the nature of falsehood, if they are of the spirit of falsehood, their nature will be like this. And so he is basically to instruct them concerning the difference between truth and error, the difference between righteousness and unrighteousness. Those are, that's the thing that's being distinguished. He's teaching them about these two natures and how that impacts humanity depending on what they choose. It's a rather simple idea, really. So if there aren't any more comments on it, that's understandable. But I thought I'd ask one last time. Are there any more comments or questions on this first part that we're looking at?
Some people think there's many ways to get to heaven, but this just making it plain and simple that there's only one way, and one way that leads away from heaven. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the way that people get confused on that is it's just a distortion of a truth. The truth is, Ellen White talks about how there are thousands of ways for God to lead someone to the truth. It's like there's multiple paths leading to the way. But there's only one way. It's just that there's many ways that someone might find the way or be led to the way. So that's kind of the thought that there's kind of many ways to heaven sort of thing is just a counterfeit of that truth.
This world is really confused on that subject.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so the master shall instruct all the children of light and shall teach them the nature, or the generations is another way to translate that, but it's a little bit more awkward and harder to comprehend. Teach them the nature of all the children of men according to the kind of their spirit. Teach them the accounts of. This word, I'm fairly certain, is the same word. You know, you read in Genesis and it says, these are the generations of so-and-so. And then it gives a genealogy. Or, it doesn't always give a genealogy. Sometimes it's, these are the generations. And other translations, more modern ones, will likely say something like, this is the account of so-and-so. Even, I think, with the heavens and the earth, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth.
Well, this helps me understand this paragraph then.
Good. You want to explain a bit more what you're understanding?
Sounds to me like he's given them a history of the various men and women who have lived and shown the people that he's telling this to, all the sons of light. If he's teaching them the generations or the nature of all the children of men according to the kind of their spirits, the signs identifying their works during their lifetime. So here's what they did during their lifetime. Their visitation for chastisement, okay, here they were punished when they did this or this, and the time of their reward, whatever their judgment will be. And it's an illustration of basically, here's the reality of sin and righteousness. Here's what sin leads to. This is what people do who give in to sin. This is how it hurts people. This is how they suffer. This is the repercussions or their judgment. And here's those who have chosen righteousness. Here's what they did during their lifetime. Here's, times when they fell and they had to be corrected. I'm thinking of David, King David. And here's, their judgment, the end result of whatever their lifetime was.
Sure, and I'll say that I don't know if it's trying to convey, that it's trying to convey the master giving a specific history going through, or just a broad brushstroke of the history of this whole thing with the focus on the origin of the spirits of truth and error and things like that. But certainly I would say that what you just expressed is very, very much so in harmony with the idea that this is trying to convey.
I wouldn't have got that without the word generation.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because you said it makes it a little bit more difficult to understand or whatever, and I was like, that actually did it for me. It helped me a lot.
Yeah, at first when I read it, it made more sense, but then I was thinking about it, it's like, the generations and what I mean, just to be more specific, when I first was studying this and I wrote down the alternate translation of generations, it made it make more sense to me. But then in reading it through with generations and then reading it through again with nature, I thought, maybe nature actually makes more sense. Mm-hmm. But I think it really, none of those words quite conveyed the idea well enough.
Yeah.
So I think saying nature, generations, account, the history of even, all of those things together help to comprehend it, because it's not just it's not just the generations in the sense that it's a genealogy, and it's not just a history in the sense that it's giving you the facts of the past, and it's not just the nature of the children of men as in just looking at the present. Generations, one of the things there is, it's more like the generating. So not just generations as in a line of people, but it's the origins of something, the sources of something. So it's kind of like how we were describing the idea of mythology, how it's the story of the origins of something that is intended on explaining why things are the way they are. So that's kind of what this is. He's teaching them why things are the way things are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So, any other comments or questions on that? I think this is very important.
Okay, so I have a comment / question. So this appears to me to be something similar to the idea of all these things were written as examples. So as an illustration, ways of learning lessons, and that the teacher of righteousness was using them as such.
Possibly. But again, in looking at it and seeing how this is described throughout the community rule or in this section that we just read, it seems to be that it's more of an overall picture that it's kind of like putting the whole story of redemption, the whole issue of sin and truth versus falsehood, righteousness versus unrighteousness. It's kind of like he's giving the big picture of it, both in terms of its meaning and in its time frame, going from the beginning and going to its final end, without necessarily going through particular stories throughout the history of the world to show that big picture. Although that could certainly be included too, but it seems as though the focus is on the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
So here, he talks about origins and the final end, and kind of how it's divided into periods of, the time or the duration of the dominion of Lot and Belial. You have phrases like that, where there's this time for error, but there will be a time for truth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or questions?
In Revelation 18, when the whole earth is filled with the glory of God, that'll be apparently the time for truth. Everybody will hear the truth, be able to decide which path they want to be on.
Amen.
For the last time.
And and there is, I will say though that may be when the way or the two ways are made more evident before the world, and that the time of truth is more evident before people. However, we're told that in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he is about to trumpet, that the mystery of God should be finished, and that the kingdom sprouts in the wilderness. And when the kingdom sprouts in the wilderness, it says that something is established in the wilderness. Do you guys remember what that is?
Kingdom.
The kingdom.
The covenant.
But there's something that is constructed, as it were, in the wilderness, that some of these prophecies speak of. Isaiah 35, Isaiah 40, a number of other of the Isaiah passages speak of this.
The way of holiness.
The way of holiness. The way of holiness is to be established in the wilderness prior to the establishment of the kingdom, in the land that is. And also, we have the whole thing in Isaiah 40 of prepare in the wilderness the way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the way. So the way of truth is to be established prior to the establishment of the kingdom in the land of promise.
So the branch is the beginning of that Revelation 18 being fulfilled.
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with how Ellen White talked about how the Revelation 18 angel came down in 1888, and it had its genesis, as it were, with the message of justification by faith preached by Jones and Wagner. And it departed. Victor Hoddeff's message was also continuing on some of the light of Genesis or of Revelation 18. And the branch message, in a more specific sense, brought back that message. And every phase of the message so far, really, the additional messages to that of the third angel have been shedding light on the message that is the message of the angel of Revelation 18. But of course, that angel, the light of its glory being spread throughout all the world, that is still yet future as far as the ultimate fulfillment of it. But the truth of the matter is that our heavenly family is right now decreeing that it is the time for truth, that the dominion of Belial is at its end, that the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. Repent and believe the good news. And sure, it may seem as small and as insignificant right now as does or as did a Galilean Jew with a ragtag band of fishermen going around talking about the kingdom of God. But that changed
John the Baptist.
The world. Yeah, that changed the world. And this, too, has potential to change the world even more, as amazing as that seems. So, and even quicker, I should say. Even just the day we live in, things can happen a lot more rapidly. So, yeah, let the truth reign, in other words. It's the season for reason.
Amen.
What Jesus began back then is coming closer to fulfillment.
Amen. Absolutely.
I've had to take the attitude that, while it's it's a very real possibility that people will not choose to accept life in this generation and put an end to sin. However, all we can do, those who are willing can do is to do as much as we can to further the work so that it's that much closer for the next group.
If it should come to that.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I'm extremely hopeful. I see a huge likelihood that it will be done in our generation. And that's what true Adventism is all about anyway.
Amen. And we expect much, therefore we attempt much. And we should expect more, and we should attempt more. And so that is the mindset that we have to have. We have to recognize the very real possibility that people won't choose, And if we recognize that, it will actually urge us to make every effort to urge people to choose the right, because we can't just sit around thinking, well, if it's time, and if it's not, it's not. No, we have to recognize that people may not choose, which also means that they may choose. There is no just time when, oh, well, God's just choosing that everyone is going to choose then. Well, that wouldn't be them choosing at all. So the fact of the matter is, the opportunity for it not to happen necessitates the opportunity for it to happen. So it can actually happen. And we need to do everything possible to make it happen.
Amen.
Amen.
The world or people have never seen the church clad in the armor of Christ's righteousness. They maybe see one person here and there, but they've never seen a group that's going forth terrible as an army with banners, etc.
Yeah, the experience that people have had and the witness that people have had from the professed followers of God is absolutely abominable. You know, we as a people and as individuals have really shamed our heavenly family. And it's time for that to come to an end, that's for sure.
Amen.
So, with this paragraph, I'll read it again. The master shall instruct all the sons of light, and so teach them the nature or the generations or the accounts or the origin and the meaning of all the children of men according to the kind of their spirit, the signs identifying their works during their lifetime or during their generation, and their visitation for afflictions or for chastisement, together with the time of their shalom, the time of their peace, the time of their restoration, or the time of their reward.
Okay, well, I had forgotten that word reward doesn't convey the meaning of one way or the other, the end result. It's totally a positive thing.
I'm not sure about that. It may actually not be.
Really?
Yeah.
Peace, restoration?
Yeah, I mean, those are ways that you could translate it, but it can also be translated reward, which doesn't necessarily have a positive meaning. So, shalom, I think in Hebrew, is a far broader word than we're used to thinking of it. Usually, we just think peace. That's what most people think. Oh, that's peace, shalom, or maybe hello, or goodbye. But the fact is, yeah, it's used for hello, it's used for goodbye, it's used for peace, it's used for restoration, it's used for reward. And I know there's more meanings too, and I'm not remembering them. But it's very broad in its meaning. So we'd have to check also, later it talks about visitation. We'd have to see if it's the same word, shalom. But it uses visitation to refer to kind of the time when the righteous receive what's coming to them and the wicked receive what's coming to them. That's one way that you could put it.
Okay.
So visitation, you know, sometimes we think, oh, the day of their visitation, it sounds like a negative thing, but it can mean, and in the community rule, it does mean both. The visitation of the righteous and the visitation of the wicked. And I think here, within the context, the word translated reward here is used in both the negative and the positive context, because it seems to be referring to all of humanity, all of the children of humanity, whether they are of the spirit of truth or the spirit of falsehood. So it's interesting that it's, okay, you have the signs identifying their works during their lifetime. What do you guys think that means?
Would you repeat that, please?
Sure. So we have the phrase here, the signs identifying their works during their lifetime. What do you guys understand that phrase to mean?
That would be their visitation or their reward. If it burned up, that was a sign of their what they did in their lifetime.
Any other thoughts on that?
Well, it makes me think of, it says according to the kind of spirit which they possess, the signs identifying their works during their lifetime. So what would be the signs that would identify a person that has the right spirit? Wouldn't those signs be gentleness, willing to share anything that they had, help others, speak in a kind tone, all those kind of things, and not speak ill of others, gossiping, etc., or doing any of the major sins or other sins, I should say. So that's what it means to me right now, unless there's something else. And then I also wanted to know, did you say there was a better one word for the word visitation?
In answer to the last question, no, not necessarily. There's not necessarily a better one word for it. On the rest of the comment, I'll mention, it's talking about signs of their works or signs identifying their works during their lifetime, that these signs are to be manifested. So, for instance, like if someone was to be punished and now they're dead, and that wouldn't be the sign during their lifetime. That's their final end, or for the righteous, their final end, which is a positive end. But this is talking about signs during their lifetime. So I know, Mom, that's the type of thing that you were saying. However, I will say, man looks on the outward appearance, the Lord looks on the heart. And there can be people who speak very gently and who do things in a quote-unquote proper way. And it might seem as though, because of that, they're walking according to the spirit of truth. But let me ask you guys, how many people out there do you think there are who are living according to the spirit of truth?
Not very many.
Not very many. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, remember how it talks about the ways of these two ways. It says that the ways of the spirit of truth are these, and it gives you all these different ways, or all these different aspects. Patience, humility, charity, so on and so forth. And then for falsehood, it gives all these other aspects. Cruelty, deceit, falseness, abundant evil, evil temper or ill temper, folly, abominable deeds, lust, blasphemy, service of uncleanness, dullness of ears, blindness of eye, all of that. So here's the thing, and this is actually the testament of Asher goes into this aspect a lot more as to how people can manifest different characteristics that in appearance look like they are partaking of both spirits. And the testament of Asher explains how really they're just partaking of one, although externally it looks like two. So here's the thing. Pretty well everyone in the world, the vast, vast majority of people are living under the dominion of Satan. If someone isn't justified by faith, they're in the way of darkness, the way of falsehood, not in the way of truth. And so, you have these two spirits, and so even though someone may speak gently or have these other things, if they have even one sin, that shows what way they are of. So, anyways, there's, I suppose, more that we can talk about in regard to the signs and in regard to these last couple aspects in the paragraph. we have just a small amount of time left on this call before our hour and a half is up. Do you guys want to bring this to an end tonight and then we'll continue on tomorrow? Or do you want to have us call back in and continue on for a while?
I could vote for stopping it for tonight.
Me too.
And then beginning tomorrow fresh.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. And I'll just pray just so that we aren't waiting for volunteers. Heavenly Family, thank you so very much for this meeting. Thank you for the opportunity to study the community rule and to investigate it. Thank you for opening up before us the two ways, the two spirits. Help us to understand it. Help us to dwell upon these things tonight and through the day tomorrow, and to be ready for the meeting tomorrow night. Toda Eloheinu, bless all the branches.
Amen. God's blessing. Good night to you all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.